Hey, it's Amy from Create Magic at Work, and welcome to the Magic Formula. I've teamed up with John Nieters from Test RX MD to bring you exactly what you've been asking for. I'm so excited to introduce you to this special series that takes you on a deep dive into experiencing life fulfillment and magical peak experiences through the lens of quantum leadership and spiritual intelligence. In this series, we'll explore powerful practices to help you embrace your full spiritual self as a leader and harness your energy for peak performance. People everywhere are seeking these magical moments that elevate their lives and work, and we're committed to delivering just that. Trust me, this series will not disappoint. So come with me and let's dive into the Magic Formula. Okay, buckle up, everyone, because John and I recorded one of the first episodes of the Magic Formula, and we talked about resonance and frequency, and the conversation was so deep and so impactful that we had to break it up into two parts. So as part of our 12-month Magic Formula series, I'm excited to bring you something extra special this September, and it's this two-part episode from the Magic Formula on resonance and frequency. Tune into part one now and be sure to catch part two to continue this deep dive into how these concepts shape our leadership, lives, and work.
Well, hey, you beautiful people. I'm John, and this is Amy Lynn Durham as well. We're here to do a little deeper dive on some of the subjects that we covered in the intro episode of the Magic Formula. Today, we're going to be covering the frequency and resonance items that I have mentioned before, and I know that Amy is going to have a lot to add to this one as well. We've had incredible conversations about some of the rabbit holes and some of the things that we're going to be able to share with you guys, and are super excited to get started.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for asking me to come back and sit with you in the Magic Formula for the first kind of, I know we did the introduction episode, but now this is like kicking off resonance and frequency. And we strategically kind of moved this to be the first topic because there was so much that came up from our introduction conversation about how can let's just say it in layman's terms, how can I vibe at a high level? Or how can I not let someone else's vibe bring me down, low vibe bring me down, right? So John's going to get into all of that with us, and I'm probably going to interrupt him a bunch of times with like curious, crazy questions and stories. So
I love it.
Here we go.
Sounds good. I want to preface everything here with something that Nikola Tesla, it's a very famous quote from him. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And this is the basis of life. And if you think about everything that is encompassed within energy exists in the form of vibrational frequency. So everything is a vibration. Your thoughts are vibration. Emotion is vibration by when you speak, the vibrations that come out of your voice box. Color is also vibration. Think about a rainbow, right? And you see that the fractal nature of the refraction of light when it reflects off of raindrops, it separates that color from the slowest oscillating to the highest, which you probably were taught in elementary school, the Roy G. Biv, so that you can get those colors in alignment with that. Some forms will exist at higher frequencies, some will be lower. But the most important thing here is that all forms exist as a specific frequency. And it's that specific frequency that dictates exactly how it's going to interact with your own energy or how it's going to perform just in life.
I mean, it's deep, right? So I'm like thinking it through, but it almost makes me think whatever frequency we're operating from, we must be emitting a certain color, which is why some people say they can read your aura, which speaks to the limits of some of our human perception, which there's more there than meets the eye. So there has to be, one, this belief and this awareness, that we do have limits to our human perception, which is a spiritual intelligence skill. So of course, that's why I'm thinking of that. And yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm wondering what color people emanate when they're angry, or what color people emanate when they're scared, or when they're joyful and happy. And I'm wondering how those colors interact with someone else's color, with the mention of the rainbow there.
So, I mean, a lot of that, you can get into colors. And if you think about like even just your chakras, and they all have colors that are associated with each one, going from like red all the way up to violet, which again happens to be in alignment with the rainbow. So red normally is going to be something that's associated with like anger, stress, aggression, or even hunger. I mean, another little rabbit hole that people can go down is fast food. If you look at fast food companies and look at the colors that they use in their logos, you'll get a good idea of the intent of their brand or their messaging. So a lot of them are going to normally use colors that are associated with your lower chakras because those are lower vibrational items that are. And so it's also interesting to think about, okay, well, like look at Subway, for example, green and yellow, right? But is Subway perceived as a healthier fast food option for some people versus McDonald's or Burger King or Taco Bell? I mean, there could be, some reason on why they chose those colors to kind of stand out and differentiate.
For the perception. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. You can do all sorts of deep dives into all that. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool to think about. Now, another thing to think about, as we just mentioned, are thoughts are frequencies. Now, another very important concept here is to understand that you are not your thoughts. Okay. Everybody's had intrusive thoughts. Everybody's had just random thoughts that just come out of nowhere that just don't make sense to anything that you were thinking about previously. How does that even happen? Where do thoughts even emanate from? Do they emanate from you and your own brain? Or can you be influenced by outside frequencies? I mean, it's a pretty powerful thing to think about because everyone thinks, oh, well, they're in control or total control of every thought that goes on in their own head, right? That is you, right? But there's a big distinction there because as things have progressed technologically, there have been a lot of things that certain three-letter agencies have kind of taken time to explore on how they are able to basically use mind control or how they're able to control populations as a whole, not just necessarily a singular person. And this can be done with also frequency, which happens to be something that can be projected from a radio. So now you're getting into radio frequencies and can be basically forced upon populations or people from a distance when you start looking at satellites and 5G and there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Now, one thing to keep in mind though is you are not your thoughts. You're going to have thoughts that are intrusive and just randomly negative and all this and that. So now the key here on the aggregate is to understand that you're receiving frequency at all times. You're receiving thoughts. There's a collective consciousness that you tap into, and that is your spiritual connection. Now, what you are actually able to receive and what you do receive is, and you're going to probably like this wordplay here, is dictated by your mindset. Okay. Now, if you really look at those words, mind and set, you're setting your mind frequency to receive whatever perspective you are wanting in life. And your perspective is dictated by the frequency that you emanate. So that's why you can have two experiences that are identical and two people are going to have completely separate experiences because they're not the same person. They have different backgrounds, they have different beliefs and thoughts and, the whole nine, which is going to dictate their experience as being one way, but another person is going to have it completely separate. And that's why you have people have come across individuals who maybe they just had a bad run-in with them, or they got a bad, as Amy Lynn mentioned earlier, bad vibe, which is a person's vibration. Now, just because they had a bad experience with someone, does that mean that every other person on earth has a bad experience with them? Probably not, right? They probably have their own tribe or clan that they resonate with, family, all that. So if that's the case, then that means that every single person here on earth has their own perspective, and perspective is key here. And that perspective is set by your frequency that is emanated by your mind and how you can change that frequency. So think of your mind as a radio receiver, okay? And you are receiving thoughts from another place. Now, what you receive, think of it like light. White light encompasses all of the frequencies. And as you can tell by a rainbow, it can be fractaled out into different colors, which are subsets of frequencies, right? So now, if you think about it like this, okay, so now your receiving frequency is going to dictate what your perspective is, because that is your own little slice of the whole. So you're a slice of the collective. Now, that frequency can be changed. And that frequency is able to be changed by the things that you do every day. Are you doing things to better yourself? Are you constantly striving to be better today than you were yesterday? Are you constantly in a growth mindset? Because if you look at energy and how the universe works, entropy is a real thing. You've heard the saying, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Well, that's what entropy is. So taking all of these things into account, the best possible thing that you can do to ensure that you have the most positive perspective and the most healing, and let's just say the best way you can set yourself up for success is to do things in like frequencies in your own life. So you've heard that law of attraction. What you do begets more of whatever you do. Basically, that's a law of nature. So your resonance or vibration will attract other resonance or vibration. Whether you believe in the law or not doesn't really matter, because it is fundamental law. When you understand these things, you can truly realize and understand why previously in the last episode, I mentioned that we're all gods or goddesses because we have the ability to create. Well, this is a prime example of that. You have the ability to literally create your own experience while here on earth by the things that you do every single day. And you create with your voice. So when you speak you've heard of speak something into existence. Well, there's a reason that that saying exists, because you have that ability. You have the ability to do things from an energetic perspective, because how else are you going to be able to project onto others? You project onto others with your voice, because you're voicing your own opinions, your thoughts, and all of that, which turns into behavior, which then affects external. So Amy and I kind of had a little discussion before this episode of, okay, so we're talking about all these high level things. What can a person do if they're in some sort of a workplace environment where they feel marginalized, or they feel like they're not being heard, or outside external influences are being negative upon them? How can they overcome that? They feel like they're in a rut. What do? Do you just quit and go to a different workplace? I mean, for some people, maybe that is the answer, but the better answer from an energetic perspective is to understand a couple things. Number one, you are made up of what? Almost 80% water, right? Every human is. Now, there have been studies that have been done on water. There's a Japanese, I can't remember his name right now. There's a Japanese scientist who did a scientific study on snowflakes. And when you freeze water in snow form with either certain frequencies apparent, or even there have been studies like speaking nice or loving things to like a plant when it grows, or classical music versus like, headbanger music or evil, all of these negative emotions make a big difference, because that's resonance based, right?
Yeah, totally know what you're talking about. I think we talked about that one time on Create Magic at Work. It was in a high school somewhere, but there were two plants. The one plant was directed to be spoken to negatively. The other plant, everyone was directed to speak to in loving and kindness. And the one plant flourished, and the one that was spoken to negatively died. But it was like, it was in a lab, right? Like it was the same, like they watered it the same. They did everything, same conditions, other than the language and the energy that was being put towards those two living things.
So the physicist, his last name was Nikaya. And another thing to also know for resonance, this is probably going to blow some people's minds. Okay, so when you go to a church, especially if you're in Europe, where they have like really old churches, and you see the stained glass windows, right? Well, when you walk into the main entrance of a church and you normally see some sort of a circular stained glass window above those doors, and they have, various patterns, obviously, every church is different. And do you know what those actually are signifying and what they even mean? So there's a reason that they're there, and they're not just there because they look beautiful, although they do look beautiful. But what they actually are there is when you used to go to these churches, and everybody would go, like, let's just say for Christian related items, you go on a Sunday and, you have this experience and you leave feeling more whole or better than you did when you walked in. And that's what made people come back the next week over and over and over. And do you know why this happened? It happened because they were exposing them to specific frequencies because of that organ that is playing with all of the incredible harmonics that are happening within that church. And that influences the way that your body has all of that water in there. It literally influences all of that water to make you walk away feeling better than you did before you came to the service. That's done with intention. How they get you to then tithe and give them 10% of your money. Well, they have to be doing something to make you feel better, or else no one would give them money, right? So it's very simple. So basically, when you look at the stained glass above the front door of a church, that is the pattern, which you may have seen sound frequencies when they visualize what that sound frequency looks like by putting basically a kind of sand on a steel plate, and it makes these patterns. That pattern of the stained glass window is the frequency that they are emanating in their service, and what that frequency looks like on those plates when that is hit.
Interesting.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is that is really incredible. So let's take that. I'm thinking of how we respond to these beautiful frequencies. And you went back, going back to what you were saying, talking about to some of us, someone that might feel like, man, I am in a crappy frequency company. Or, hey, my company actually vibes pretty good. Like, I feel pretty good with who I work with. Either way, what are some tips to help us? You mentioned a few, but like, let's hone in on them. And before we do, I want to hear like a couple tips on how we can cultivate high frequency states, like easy, for the person that's waking up, slamming their coffee, like just trying to get to work, do their projects, pick up the kids, go home, this, that, go to bed, do it all over again. How can we help each other cultivate these high frequency states, micro steps for that? Before you give us the tips, I'd love to hear you share. I was thinking about this weekend, and I was like, man, like when we talked about it in the introductory episode, you talked about this amazing level of faith. Like, I know things are going to be okay. And I don't let other people's energy necessarily dim my light. And then I thought about, you're very open and honest about your time in prison and your spiritual awakening that occurred in prison. And I was like, well, if there was ever a place that had a resonance and a frequency that I would assuming and judging, is pretty low, it would be a prison. What did you do during those times where you cultivated a high frequency state once you had this spiritual awakening? Or did you even? Or was it after you got out? Or do you want to share with everybody? Because I'm asking this because a lot of people compare their job or their company at times to prison. right? Like, oh God, this feels like a prison. I got to get out of here. And so I think the correlation is quite interesting. And I'd love to hear your personal story and then maybe the micro steps on how we can cultivate high frequency states, no matter what space we're in.
So yes, of course, prison is a very low vibrational place. You are around society's rejects as would be dictated by something they did was not agreeable with society. And that's why they technically broke the law and are serving time for that. So there are some very interesting people in there. So what you can do is, first of all, the things you have no control over, what are you worrying about those for? Certain things you literally cannot do anything about, whether it's a prison environment, whether it's a workplace environment, whatever it is. So those first need to be isolated. Maybe make a list of those things. If you want to do some sort of an exercise, you can make a list of the things that you cannot control and go ahead and just write those on a piece of paper and just throw that right in the trash bin, because you're not going to be able to do a damn thing about it. So if you can't do a damn thing about it, what are you worried about it for? Your worrying is going to do what? Just get you in a lower vibrational state, which then means you're going to attract lower and lower vibrations to you. So it's very, very important to separate yourself mentally from that. If you don't, it's a horrible experience. I've been there, I've gone through it, and it's not fun. So first of all, figure out what you can control then. Obviously, if we threw those out the window, so now what can you do? So look at the variables that you are able to control. And the variables that you are able to control, which obviously in a prison environment is not very many, but you still have things that you can control. So what you eat, are you physically active? Are you stimulating your mind, reading books? What does your day-to-day formula look like, right? Those are how you are still able to dictate what your mindset or your mindset frequency is going to be. Because then you can start getting into things, well, okay, so you need to, first of all, you need to be able to go within. So that's how you're able to basically tune out the outside world and to listen to yourself and your higher self and the collective consciousness and other places as you can learn practices such as astral travel. But first of all, you have to be in tune with your own energy and what that feels like and the whole essence of you. Now, if you're working at a workplace environment that's not conducive to who you are truly, I personally would be looking for a different line of work or a different place to work at, because if you cannot be your true self in whatever environment and you have the control and the ability to change that variable, why would you not change that variable? Because at the end of the day, life is all about you living your best life. So yeah, you may make $500,000 a year somewhere, but your soul is being sucked from you every single day when you go in. That doesn't sound very fun. It's not a very good trade-off.
I think my former colleagues referred to that as the golden handcuffs.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to just echo back something you shared, that focusing on what you can control is actually, I don't know if you know this. I'm like, he's literally talking about one of the main modalities from Stephen Covey, who's really popular in leadership spaces. And one of the recommended exercises for skill 15 in the SQ21 spiritual intelligence is doing the circles of control or the circles of influence. And you draw 3 circles on a piece of paper, and the outer circle, you do exactly what you recommended to everybody. You tell everybody, you write down everything you can't control. And then the next layer is you write down some things that you might feel like you have influence over. And then that inner circle, which is a little bit smaller, is what we can control, or what we think we can or can control. And the goal is to focus on exactly what you said, what we can control, and then also dip into, hey, what can we influence with this? And really getting really clear on letting go of the things we can't control and doing that energy shift and that focus to the influence and the control. Because exactly, just echoing back what you said, that wasted energy is gosh, we could be doing so much to transmute, transform, if we can and it takes each other to remind each other, right? To shake us out of that. Like, hey, like focus on what you can control here. And like, let's not borrow trouble from the future. Let's not bring past experiences into this moment that's happening. In regards to your recommendation, which I love, by the way, I mean, everybody needs to tap into their inner wisdom and compassion and make a decision for them about what job's right for them. If you sign the contract that you're working with golden handcuffs and you practice acceptance with that, then acknowledge that that's the space you're in. We were talking a little bit offline about the scale of motivations with Ian Marshall and the book, The Quantum Leader. And I'm thinking as you're sharing that, it just intuitively, it kind of came to me because I really want to speak to anyone listening. Sometimes we are in these spaces where the resonance and the frequency is depersonalization, which is like the lowest on his scale, or guilt and shame. And we feel, even though you and I would look and be like, no, you can do this, we feel rendered powerless because of these resonances and these frequencies. How do we wake up from that?
Honestly, what I have personally experienced in my life is that what you just mentioned there, the shame, the guilt, all of these very low vibrational energies and states. Honestly, your mind is normally more harsh to you from the anxiety that's provoked by not wanting to share this or that. So what I have found is the best solution here to environments that potentially can be dicey. Let's just say that. I normally just try to, first of all, we previously mentioned where when you walk into a room, be so high vibrational that you're going to light that room up. So that's key one. Now, number two, though, is if that's not necessarily the case, then think about things that you're grateful for. Because if you look at that same scale, where does gratitude and gratefulness lie? Pretty high. So now if you start thinking, we mentioned earlier that thoughts are a vibration, which inherently means that they're a frequency as well. If you start thinking about high vibrational states or things that you're grateful for, well, now what has happened to your thoughts, which are a vibration, which is connected to you. So now you've just inherently raised your vibration by just thinking about something that you're grateful for. It's that simple. Or thinking about like love, things that you love, right? Now, what I personally do sometimes from my own standpoint, I share the prison thing because that also inherently says, okay, look, I'm putting this out on the table. It normally creates a bonding experience. And yes, it can be something that so many people are so ashamed of and scared of, but take these things that you're shameful of or scared of or whatever way and turn it into something empowering. And that is transmutation at its finest.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.